Hello there again. I want to discuss a recent report completed by the Tory MP David Gauke. You may be familiar with David Gauke. He's one of the Tory MPs that perhaps should have been in the Liberal Democrats, and even up to, I believe, last year, he was still having a moan about Brexit. But regardless, he's completed an interim report for the Independent Sentencing Review, and the final report is due to come out relatively soon. But he's completed that Independent Sentencing Review. He's produced a report, and I'm going to include a link to that report in the description of this video. I'm also going to put the UK prison population statistics from the House of Commons Library. Both of those things, just in case you wanted some bedtime reading. But I think it's important to include that report. In fact, both those reports. I'm not going to quote figures at you because I think figures just get lost in all of the weeds of this. And really, we have to address the core of what he's really saying. And numbers don't really address this type of liberal perspective that Mr. Gauke is proposing. Now, in a recent Guardian article on the Gauke report, we can call it, what they said was, the disastrous result of punishing offenders is a prison system on the brink of collapse. Locking up offenders for long sentences has led to a doubling of the prison population. David Gauke has pointed out also that prison is not the only form of punishment. The Guardian article then goes on to say, systemic over-reliance on custodial punishment is not only ruinously expensive and unsustainable, it is also, as the report makes clear, dysfunctional and counterproductive. Our scandalously overcrowded prisons are dangerous and despairing places, which struggle to adequately recruit and retain overstretched prison officers. Resources to facilitate rehabilitative work for inmates are shamefully threadbare, and the costs of banging so many people up has diverted money from services dedicated to reducing the possibility of their reoffending. And a vicious cycle of recidivism, or, to the normal person that's tending to reoffend, is the dismal and inevitable outcome. It goes on to say, after 30 years of performative tough-on-crime politics, making and winning this argument will not be easy. From Ken Clarke to Rory Stewart and Mr. Gauke himself, successive Conservative ministers attempted in the 2010s to address the damaging explosion in the prison population. All fell foul of the hostile right-wing media and their government's unwillingness to abandon a simplistically conceived law and order agenda. So, quite a little few sentences there, which on the whole are complete garbage. So, what's his report arguing for? What's he really trying to do? Well, Mr. Gauke's report argues that it's essentially the public's fault. So the public likes law and order, and it really likes it when you get really violent criminals and we bang them away for a long time, and this prevents them from harming other members of society. Now, the concept of punishment versus rehabilitation is a long-held liberal fantasy. Liberals believe that if we're a bit nicer to criminals and if we give them some skills and perhaps show them the error of their ways, and perhaps where they were born it was a bit of a lottery, and if you lived in an area where everyone was committing crime and your parents didn't have much money and you were forced into crime and all of these arguments, these garbage arguments, then we would be able to help people and would be able to help these people who are committing these vicious acts on the public to come round to our way of thinking. And this type of fanciful suicidal empathy, I think that's the best way to put it, doesn't lead anywhere that's productive for society. There is only one way to prevent people from reoffending, and that's to make sure they remember in their head, I better not reoffend here, otherwise I'm going to be sent to prison for a very long time. If you shorten the prison sentences, what you are ultimately going to do is you're going to encourage people to commit more crime, because the punishment later on is not worth thinking about. Now, you know the type of story that we're talking about here. You see the type of story in the papers, on social media all the time, and it goes something like this. Man drives car down road, man doesn't have a licence, and he drives in while drunk and he hits somebody who's some pillar of the community who does charity work all week, and kills this person and somebody else, and this person gets sentenced to 30 months in prison and they're out in 16 months or something like that. Now, when you see these types of articles, it obviously annoys everybody. Everybody gets annoyed with it, because it's clear that if you've ended the life of somebody, if you've stopped somebody from living and breathing, then perhaps, no matter what the circumstance, then you need to go to prison for a very, very long time. Now, one of the arguments is that it's ruinously expensive and unsustainable. Well, I would argue there is no other option. And I don't believe it to be ruinously expensive and unsustainable, because what happens after the society that we live in learns, oh, if I do this, if I go out and violently beat someone up and take their mobile phone off them, and I'm going to get 5 years, then I really have to think about in my mind, is the next 5 years of my life worth the couple of £100 I'm going to get off this mobile phone? And most of the time the answer to that's going to be no. The only way to deter crime in this country is using the punishment system. Rehabilitation can be used as a form to assist prisoners, but it can't form the foundational basis of the prison system. Now, you may have seen Sir Keir Starmer's prison minister, James Timpson. And you probably know him from where you get your keys cut all around the country. And he's a former chair of the Prison Reform Trust. And he gets to say what he wants with impunity, because he takes on ex-convicts, which is very nice for him to do that, to give people a second chance, because everyone does deserve a second chance, without a doubt. But he believes that this gives him a licence to spout whatever nonsense he believes he's going to spout. And he's a vocal advocate of lowering the rate of incarceration and improving conditions. So what he wants to do is lower the rate of incarceration and improve prison conditions. Well, I would argue what we need to be doing is increasing the rate of incarceration and lowering prison conditions, not improving them. So what you've got here, you've got the Labour Party asking Mr. Gauke to complete this report. So you've got him here saying that, oh, this prison system's not right, we need to focus on rehabilitation, and prison should not be the only form of punishment. You've also got the man, Sir Keir Starmer's prison minister, James Timpson, on that side of the argument, saying that we need to stop putting as many people in prison. And of course, we need to remember, let's not forget about the fact that we've just watched people coming out of prison popping a bottle of champagne because we've allowed people who've completed 40% of their sentences to be let out because they're too full. So what are we to get from all of this? Well, our politicians are in the grip of what I said earlier, which is a version of suicidal empathy. They believe through kindness that they'll be able to prevent hardened criminals from committing violent crime, murder, drug dealing, all the rest of it, machetes in town centres, snatching mobile phones. You've got all the rest of the crimes that go on, the horrific number of crimes that go on in society. And you've got all of these politicians here believing that the way forward is to reduce incarceration rates and improve conditions. And by doing this, we're going to end the vicious cycle of where prisoners tend to reoffend. And that, I would put to you, is the biggest load of garbage that I've ever heard. Up until the middle of last century, we used to hang people for murder. Now, capital punishment is quite an extreme form of punishment, and I, for one, don't believe that for run-of-the-mill murder, if we can even say such a thing, but for, your everyday garden variety murder victim, I don't believe that capital punishment is appropriate. However, for the most heinous of crimes, I believe it is. And so if you've got somebody, as events have shown us recently, who gleefully will kill large numbers of people and then sit down and smile about it, it could well be argued very fairly that that person shouldn't have the right to live anymore. And I would argue that that's more humane to society than anything else. But aside from the capital punishment argument, last century we were hanging people for murder. Now, at the point where we stopped hanging people for murder, after that point, the rate of murders increased. So the question you've got to ask yourself is, was it more humane to stop capital punishment, given that when we stopped capital punishment, the rate of murder increased? So once people kind of understood that I'm not going to be killed if I kill this person, I'll probably sit in prison for 10 or 20 years, or life as it's known, which is somewhere around 15, 16 years or whatever it is like that. Once people learned that, then the rate of murders increased, because really that's not the whole of your life. Most people could commit that crime and still be out and have a life after that. And for that reason, it was a very, very bad idea to do it on one level. But as I've said, I'm not really sure if I believe in it for all murders, because you've got miscarriages of justice and all of that. And we are going off on a bit of a tangent here. But aside from that, I think what that correlation shows is that the public responds to severe sentencing guidelines, severe punishments. So you can influence public behaviour and protect the public by introducing these types of longer sentences and harsher conditions. And so what you've got here, you've got Mr. Gauke, Mr. Timpson, certainly The Guardian, certainly the liberal establishment and left-wing media, who believe that we should reduce incarceration and increase conditions, and we need to focus on rehabilitation, when really it's already been proved that that does not help the public long term. And who are we really looking after here? Are we looking after the person that's committed the crime? Or are we looking after the general public? I would argue that for justice, it must be the general public. And this version of suicidal empathy that's coming into our society from every which way you look is going to be the end of Western civilization, unless we make a severe about turn and start to consider the ramifications of these really, really stupid decisions. Thanks very much for your time.